Good evening. This is James of Marine Castaway. This is episode 4, the epilogue to my Paddling the Cape Fear River series. If you haven't seen those previous videos, I highly recommend pausing right now and going to check my earlier episodes out because they show the entire adventure paddling from Jordan Dam all the way to Southport, North Carolina, the entire stretch of the river. It will bring a lot more context to this episode. As always, if you go back and check out those videos, I encourage liking those videos if you enjoy the content. And if you'd like to see more content of this kind of nature, I have a lot more adventures planned ahead. Please hit that subscription button and you'll be notified whenever more content is published. In order for me to not just talk you guys to death, I have invited a really good friend of mine today. She's a working professional writer and has been doing this for the last 15 years, largely interviewing people who are game changers in their field, be it art, technology, the construction industry, sports, advocacy. She does it all. She is also the co-founder of a new online magazine called Moxie, the voice of women in infrastructure. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Miss Monica Dutcher. Monica, welcome and thank you for joining me on today's episode.
Hey, Jimmy, it's great to be here. I really appreciate you having me. And when I heard you were doing this, I was riveted and was following your whole journey along the way. Um, Watching your Facebook updates with every mealtime, during those 9 days or so. Um, and it was really great. And I just certainly have a few questions about your motivation and the logistics and kind of the heart and soul behind the journey. And I'm really looking forward to interviewing you tonight.
Cool. So you do this all the time. I'll let you guide the discussion and take it wherever you want it to go.
Nice. So I think everyone's wondering, every sane person at least is certainly wondering why. Why do
Um,
this? Why put your body through such a journey down the Cape Fear for dozens upon dozens of miles?
to a degree, I'm still questioning why today. Uh, Probably to go back a little bit. I moved to Wilmington about 3 years ago, and I met a really good friend of mine shared an article with me in the magazine Our State, and it was about 4 guys who got together and about 10 years ago from today paddled the entire length of it and the adventure that they had. And it kind of put a spark in there because I had been on different parts of the river, but it was that inkling of how many people can say they have seen the whole thing. People in Wilmington have seen their stretch, people in Lillington may have seen their stretch, people in Fayetteville may have seen theirs, but so few people have seen the entire length of this awesome resource, this awesome natural resource in North Carolina. So there was that adventure, and then also just the challenge of, as it says, Marine Castaway in the title of my channel. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and I tend to be that type A personality of, oh, this is something that sounds like it's really hard and nobody's ever done it. Well, we're gonna knock that one a notch down and be one more person to do it. So I guess it was a combination of those two things, just the wonder, the adventure, and the question, can I make this happen, and pushing through to see if I could.
That's fantastic. And another why question, why do it castaway style? Why go alone?
So the doing it alone piece was, it came down to, if I'm going to do this, it's most likely that I'm going to have to do it alone. There was, again, I got this article in my hand, or the article from Our State in my hands about 3 years ago. And there was definitely the reaching out to friends who I knew were other paddlers or kayakers and kind of feeling out interest. And it seemed like I would get a lot of, yeah, that seems really cool and I'd like to do it, but, and then fill in whatever reason you want to after the but, whether it was couldn't get the time off work, family, kids, just other interests. So it's not to say that there aren't people who always want to do something, but I kind of ran into that wall about a year ago where I just said, if I'm going to do this, I need to put my foot down and say, I'm going. And do you want to come with me? Not the, I would like to go, but want to go with somebody else, and we'll hold off to that point, because there's no guarantee that it's ever going to happen if you do that. So it's kind of just taking that big leap and saying, I'm going to go. And if somebody goes with me, that's great. But if not, I'm not going to let it hold me back.
Right. You can't wait on someone else to tackle your dream.
Exactly.
You have to go your own way. And was there any mental preparation with that as you were preparing, or mainly logistics, strength training, anything like that? Describe how you prepared for this paddle and
So
plan for it.
Oh yeah. So I'll go back a little bit. I have a decent amount of outdoors experience. I mean, I came up through the Boy Scouts. I was always out in the woods, always out on the water. And of course, there was the Marine Corps, where I went through desert survival, cold weather mountain warfare survival, and a number of other trainings like that. So that created a solid baseline in the technical skills required. I definitely had to increase my kayaking ability, and I've done that, more or less constantly. Wilmington is a city on a peninsula. We have the Intercoastal Waterway on one side and the Cape Fear River on the other. So finding something to do on the water is pretty much constant, whether you're kayaking, paddleboarding, surfing, etc. As far as the kayaking, I definitely had to lean in a little bit more into that. To make sure I wasn't totally off balance with what I was going to attempt to do, I did a couple test paddles. I think I talk about it in the videos where I did the stretch between 3 and 2, and I also did the stretch from Lock and Dam 1 to Wilmington, downtown Wilmington. And those were test paddles to just basically test out the kayak, the gear that I had. And that was definitely good to do. I changed my gear, traded different things out as I figured out what worked. So that set me up a lot better for success than if I had just gone out alone. So yeah, I mean, it's just a combination of prior experience, which I think everybody has some level of prior experience. And if you don't, you figure out what holes you have and you do your best to fill them in before you take off.
How did you decide on your equipment, or did you already have all the gear? I'd like to learn a little more about the specs on your vessel.
So the boat that I had is a Wilderness Systems brand kayak. It is their Tarpon 160. It's a 16-foot long sit on top kayak with the front and back hatches. They're not waterproof, but they're certainly splash proof. And this boat being so long, in order to help you steer, it has a rudder. Nice. The nice thing about that is where a lot of kayaks, you have to, paddle on one side because you're trying to turn in the opposite direction. This one, it doesn't matter. You just paddle whatever you want to do, and your feet are adjusting the rudder to turn you in the direction that you want to go. So I ended up settling on this kayak after testing out a couple other ones. Because of that ease of steerage with the rudder. And then also, I personally prefer sit on top kayaks. I don't like the sit ins. I feel like they're more restrictive on my legs, and I personally have some leg issues that I like that freedom of movement. And then additionally, again, you're going to be on the water for 10 days. You need a lot of storage space. So having those really big hatches to easily get things in and out of, and also the amount of interior space that allowed me to pack things into, I had no problem storing everything that I needed. In fact, I probably could have gotten even more in there if I wanted to. So great boat. Absolutely love it. And it's definitely something I'm looking forward to take out again in the near future.
Nice. And in terms of storage, we're just basically talking your general survivor camper gear type stuff, food, water filtration.
Right. It was basically.
I don't know about GPS type stuff, anything like that.
Honestly, the only, well, let me back up. I'll answer the initial question, then I'll back up to the GPS piece.
Yeah.
Mostly the gear I slept in a hammock. So there was no ground sleeping. And the reason I went with that was because the Cape Fear River has a lot of muddy banks. So sleeping on the ground, well, you don't want to sleep on the mud. A, because of the wet, B, because of the cold. So I went not knowing what area I'd necessarily be sleeping in every night. I just said, well, it'd be better to find 2 trees and just set up a hammock. So a hammock slept the whole time. The food that I took was all freeze dried, dehydrated food where you just add boiling water. And then, as you said, I filtered my water out of the river using a hand pump filtration system. I'm trying to think what other major pieces. Other than that, it was just kind of luxury stuff. I kept 2 phones with me. That would have been my GPS. I didn't have any specialized other GPS. And also, I'm on the river. If I keep flowing south, eventually I'm going to hit the ocean. And or a bridge or something that, okay, well, I can pull out here and find civilization if necessary. So the GPS wasn't necessary, but I did use the phones in order to get GPS locations to report back to people back home, where basically, because again, you're out there alone and anything can happen while you're alone. So you definitely need to have that fail safe of, hey, Joe, if I haven't reported to you in 4 hours, you need to send the Cajun Navy or the Swiftwater Rescue or whatever to come find me, because something's probably happened.
Yes.
So that was pretty much it as far as gear. There really wasn't too much else. It was very trying to go as slim as possible, just enough to get me through, and not overload the boat, especially in the beginning, because as you see in the rapids videos, the water being as low as it was, having a low in the water boat, I ended up getting stuck on the rocks a number of times. So it was definitely trying to be as light as possible, but also maintaining everything necessary to survive for that 10 days.
Definitely. So clearly, a lot of forethought went into this. A lot of fail safes were put in place. A lot of checks were done, pre-checks, safety checks. A lot of logic went into getting through this journey. But
Right.
certainly there had to be something that you weren't ready for.
Oh,
Certainly.
absolutely.
Or prepared for.
And to kind of lean into that a little bit, when you're out there
Yeah.
alone in any situation, that is a 24/7, 365 thing that's going through your head of, well, here I am at this point. If something goes wrong, what do I do? Here I am at this point. If something goes wrong, what do I do? And a lot of it, hell, I'm paddling in gator country. So if I fall out of the kayak, I need to figure out, how can I get in the kayak as fast as possible, or how do I get to land as fast as possible without attracting a lizard of unusual size to come and make me into an afternoon snack, or any other amount, like the rapids. Like looking back, I probably should have worn a helmet through that, in the off chance that I got thrown out of the boat and hit my head.
Exactly.
Looking back, that was probably not a smart move, but everything worked out. But back to your question, what was I not prepared for? Obviously, and I speak about this in the video, I did get Giardia. And that came from my water filtration. Basically, the filter ran out and I was not in a location where I could get clean water. I had to drink. It was kind of brown on day 7, not going to lie. And I think that's where I most likely picked it up. Yeah, so I did pick up Giardia, so I should have brought more water filters. There were a couple nights there that got kind of cold because, I had planned on more or less summer heat the entire time. I thought I was going to be sweating at night. And then we had basically the day before a cold front come through, but I had so many other things going through my head, I didn't put that one piece together. So there were a couple nights. I think the first night was the coldest. It got down to 53 degrees, and I shivered the entire night.
That's cold.
Oh,
That's cold when you're outside.
Miserable. Not as cold as Cold Weather Mountain Warfare, where we dug holes in the snow to stay warm, but definitely much colder than the 76 that I usually keep it inside of the house. Let me see. The other thing, honestly, looking back, the thing that this would have been a preparation activity, is I should have done the rapid portion before doing this. I said before that I did Cape Fear Lock and Dam 3-2, and I did 1 to Wilmington. I should have done the rapid portion because honestly, it's been a while since I've done any whitewater, but also doing it in that 16-foot long boat, you know, it's almost like turning a carrier in comparison to a whitewatering kayak, where those are only like 6 feet long, and you just twist your hips and you're turned 90 degrees. It's the difference between turning a speedboat versus turning an aircraft carrier, in all honesty. And there was a lot of, I definitely took a lot of time going through those, trying to figure out what is my line. And what I mean by line is, what is the path I'm going to go through this? And as soon as I go through this one, what's the next path I need to be looking at that I need to get myself turned into? Because very easily that 16-foot boat could become basically, get pushed up into a rock that I don't want to and turn me over, which it eventually did there on day 2. So if I had to do that over, I would have practiced that a lot more, because that was something that I went into entirely unprepared for. But again, it was a measured risk, being that, the water was so low. In all honesty, if a rapid knocked me out, stand up, because you're in at most waist deep water. But like I said, you run into issues with, personal safety, because again, I wasn't wearing a helmet. And then the time that the boat did end up getting knocked onto a rock, it ended up filling up with 15 gallons of water that I later had to dump out of the boat and dry everything out.
Yeah. Yeah. So given clearly there were things you weren't ready for, there are things you would do differently, maybe, beef up the personal safety a bit, bring extra filtration for that system.
Yep.
Anything else you would do differently?
Well, so this kind of goes back to, and this is something that you don't have control. If you're going to do something, you might have to do it alone, and just accept you're going to do it alone. But, and I'll put it this way. It was a great trip. If it came to doing it alone, I wouldn't do it alone again. But if somebody came to me and was like, "Hey, I'd like to do it," okay, I'd go do it then. There was definitely a point, and I knew this would happen, because humans are very social creatures. We're meant to interact with one another. But there were many days that interaction was at most waving "hey" at somebody on a dock or on another boat, and that is the extent of the conversation that you would have. So day 1, I'm freaking out, because am I actually going to do this? Yes, you're actually doing this. Am I actually going to do this? Yes, you're actually doing it. Going through that loop over and over and over. Day 2 was all the rapids. Day 3 was Fayetteville, and I'm coming down from that. It was day 4 that I really started feeling like I'm alone, and it'd really be nice to have somebody out here. That went away after day 5, because that was the midpoint. But that was definitely something that, I would really have liked to enjoyed this experience with somebody else. But again, you can't base life off of waiting on other people to do something with you. Sometimes you just have to go and do it.
So did you ever find your Wilson? Was there anything that you could connect with at all as you were alone?
I can't say that. The closest to that, maybe, I'd have these moments where, especially early in the river, where the birds kind of filled that void. And what would happen is there would be like a great blue heron I'd notice. And right as I'm coming down the river, even with the heron, all of a sudden it would take flight and glide about 200 yards down the river. And all of a sudden, well, okay. And I'd start paddling harder and get up to that bird about even with it again. And it'd go another 200 yards. Multiple birds did this during the entire trip.
Yes.
And I don't know what behavior aspect it is of birds. And it wasn't just the herons or the storks. I did that with a couple bald eagles. And I did that with some other, they weren't blue jays. There was some other similar sized bird, but it was just interesting how a number of these different species would do that. They'd go 200 yards and I'd be like, okay, there's the next 200 yards, get that. And then the bird would go another
Yes.
200. Okay, let's get that. That unfortunately kind of went away in the later days of it. But at that point, I had hit the point mentally where it was, I'm only 60 miles from the end. I'm only 40 miles from the end. And after you've come 130, that seems like nothing. So you no longer need, I guess for me, I no longer needed that sense of that companion, which in a quasi type A, that bird is pushing me, okay, to go that much more distance. I didn't need that anymore. It was now just, okay, the only thing now is just me and a challenge against what's left once I got over the 100-mile mark, let's say.
Right. And so at that point, would you say some of that need, if you will, to commune with people, to interact with human beings kind of took a back seat and it was more laser focused to the finish line?
Oh, absolutely.
Nice.
It was, now granted, on day 7, I got to pull out of the water and actually get some real food at a brewery. But even then, my mind really wasn't on the beer that was in front of me. It was on,
Right.
you're only having one tonight because tomorrow you're going this far. And the day after that, you're going this far. It really shut things off because especially that last 60 miles, especially was like, nope, we got to go. You are this close. Let's get it. Lo and behold, there was definitely a wrench thrown into that, but that was the mindset at the time.
Now, were you ever afraid at this point that I might not make this? Or were you ever afraid of something lurking about you as you were setting camp or in the middle of the night? I mean,
Absolutely.
at any point, tell me about your fears on the Cape Fear.
So, I mean, well, I'll do this from start of the river all the way to the end. The rapids definitely got, I wouldn't say fear, but the concern level was definitely up. And I would honestly say that for a lot of things. I wouldn't necessarily say it was, oh, you're afraid, because when you're afraid, you start acting irrationally.
Yes.
But it was a respectful concern for the environment that you're in. So definitely the rapids, which again, the mitigation technique is approach slowly, try and find the line, and you may have to back up and totally readjust and take a different line than you were coming up on. Did that multiple times. The camping in the woods in the middle of the night, that was a little nerve-wracking. North Carolina is a gun-loving state, and some of the places that I camped, I know some of the places I camped were like wilderness preserves. Okay, I knew I was fine in those. But there were some of them, it's like, well, I might be on private property, I might not. And the last thing I want to do is wake up in this hammock to somebody with a gun. That was a little nerve-wracking, but it's one of those things that you go through in your head as a possibility. Luckily, it never happened. I did one night see a guy, it was night 2, on the opposite bank. He came down the hill and I realized over there's private property, but I'm on an island, so he can't own that. But yeah, he came down the hill with a bug sprayer and a AR-15 across his chest. I was like, what the heck is that for? But it makes sense because I realized I'm in bobcat country and I'm in boar country. And so for me, I think it was day 4 or 5, but I was paddling along and all of a sudden I hear this rustling in the weeds to my left. And I look over and this pack of wild boars had come out to the bank, I guess, to get water. And they look at me and I look at them and we're just staring each other down for a second. And suddenly the big black one, I don't know if they're matriarchal or patriarchal, but it goes, whee! And they all took off into the weeds the opposite direction. But
were the hooves thunderous?
Oh, it was a lot of noise, but it was one of those, it's like, I really don't want to run into that in the middle of the night, because you hear the horror stories of, wild boars can take down a person because they don't look that big, but they're 300 pounds. And of course, the other concern, of course, especially towards the end, is the Gators. It was in 2018 on the Lumber River. A 14-foot, 800-pounder was killed. And the picture of it is just ginormous. Remember, my kayak is only 16 feet. So it was only 2 feet shorter. And I saw a couple gators during the trip, but you have to remember, for every one that I see, there was probably 4 more that saw me and I didn't see them.
Right.
I respected
Stealth
the fact.
mode.
I respected the fact that as long as I'm in the boat, I'm the biggest thing on the water, and they're probably not going to be too interested in me. But God forbid, if you fall out, you're now a splashing target.
Yes.
So it was, and same thing with getting water, standing on a riverbank, I'm sitting there splashing water as I'm using the hand pump. Well, that could easily be misdirected to them as an animal that's struggling on a riverbank. Let's go check that out. So I would usually put myself, usually like on the opposite side of a fallen log, and throw the hose to the opposite side of the log and then start pumping. That way, well, okay, if he's going to come up, he's got to come up over that log to get to me. And it gives me that much more distance. So things like that, where it's not a necessary fear, but you're definitely alert and aware of the other dangers that are around you as you're going along on something like this.
Oh, totally. And certainly there had to be things that happen on the Cape Fear that are to stay on the Cape Fear. But we want to know what those things are. Things that maybe you would have blushed a little if you knew someone was watching you from the banks. Things that were maybe a bit frivolous and foolish. They no longer stay on the Fear.
So probably the only story that it's like, did I really do that? But honestly, I was so angry at the time, it makes sense. So on day 7, I had initially, and this is seen in the video, I had planned on doing a 22 mile paddle. And I get to the location. It's a location that I had scouted back in May of where I wanted to camp. And when I arrive, the vegetation is much thicker than I anticipated. There were a number of new fallen trees that had floated into that location. So I couldn't get the boat anywhere near the bank without bumping into a tree that I would have to climb over. And I'm just screwing around trying to figure out how to get up there at high tide, so being at high tide, the way the river is at these points, it's not a gentle slope bank. It's more or less a cliff. So if I were to step off the boat, I'd immediately drop 3 feet and maybe hit a muddy bank with all these other trees and stuff and you can't see in there. So I'm screwing around trying to figure out how am I going to get up in this camping spot, and a 6-foot gator raises up out of the water. And it was one of those that the second I saw that gator, I knew what it meant. I knew, you're not camping here. You, in all your pain, have to paddle 12 more miles today. And I don't know what it was in me, but I took that paddle, raised it over my head, and just started screaming at it. Just not screaming words, just war cry, like, ah, and it didn't dive. And that pissed me off even more. So next thing you know, I kicked the rudder in the direction of that gator, and I'm charging it as fast as I can kayak, which is not very fast, trying to get that thing moving. And at that point it dove. But that's when my arms just dropped and I'm defeated. And I'm like, I'm really glad no one was on the river to watch that. But it was.
So you charged the gator with a Viking
I charged
call.
the gator because I was absolutely I'm done. I'm absolutely done. And I'm furious at the world. Like, I just want to get on the bank and be done.
And the point of this charge was ostensibly to shoo it away?
Just go away. Go the hell away. And it did. Who knows where it went. But it was one of those, I had to vent, and that was my way of venting. And looking back, if there was video or somebody standing on the bank who saw that, they'd probably laugh their ass off or be like, that guy needs to be in an insane asylum. But I did lose it there just a little bit. But hey, Yeah, it sucked. But it also showed me what I was capable of, because I did 32 miles in less than 12 hours that day.
That's
And the
huge.
last 4 hours, I never got out of the kayak once. So it was just
Generally,
paddle,
what was your pace? Your
right around 3 miles an hour, I would
Yeah.
say, um, was the average pace for most of it. The Tarpon 160, again, great boat. It's so sleek. It holds a line very well, very straight, thanks to the rudder. But also, it's so hydrodynamic that, at least on flat water, when you're paddling, once you get up to speed, you can drift for upwards of a minute before you come to a stop, maybe longer.
Unless you're
So
in that chop, of
unless you're
course.
in the,
Which,
yeah, as you see on the final day, if you're in really choppy water, all that turbulence will stop you dead within 10 seconds. But the boat, otherwise, if you're in regular flat water, which is generally what that boat is designed for, you can drift and glide. So the energy output it takes a lot to get going, but maintaining it takes almost nothing. Which is another aspect of why I chose that specific kayak, to do this trip in. So the energy output, yes, it was generally about 8 hours a day paddling at 3 miles an hour, stop about once every hour and a half to stretch your legs, maybe get a bite to eat. But yeah, I would usually get 20 to 25 miles in 8 to 9 hours, is all it would take.
yeah. And clearly, there was some aspect of paddling that angered your hand or your arm or your neck, or I know
Right.
everyone has an
So,
opinion on what is
yeah.
actually
And
unhappy.
the more people you talk to about what your problem is, it's amazing how many doctors who haven't been to medical school have opinions on what your issues are, and how to fix them, no less. But
Yes.
so yeah, my left hand during the trip, um, my primary care physician thinks it's in the wrist, kind of like carpal tunnel. The muscles there doing all that work, repetitive motion, swelled up, put pressure on the nerve, and that's what was causing the pinpoint pains in my hand, and somewhat also in the forearm leading to the elbow. I've had some people say, well, they think it was the neck, and initially I was kind of thinking it was the neck, because my paddling posture is not something I recommend. I tend to lean forward and crank my neck up, which is not
Mm,
something you should do. So initially I was thinking the neck, but honestly, now it's been a couple of weeks. I'm feeling a lot less pain. I still have some tingling in my middle finger and my thumb, but even that is slowly getting less and less every day. So the nerves are healing. We're getting there. As I continue to well, A, let it rest for majority, but also B, when I work out, I'm also just very conscious in how I'm using it.
yes. So the day that you literally couldn't grip, how did you end up paddling so much that day? If you're not
Well, that
gripping,
day,
what are you
that day,
doing?
that day, it really wasn't a lot. That
But you
day,
still
it was only
moved.
it
You
was only an
still
8 mile paddle, and again, a lot of that day being that early morning, I had the wind at my back, and also the tide was going out. So I'll be honest,
nice.
a lot of it was Mother Nature getting me to location number two. But even then, that's still pretty slow. Um, given the rate that I was going, it was uh, basically the way I got around it. Besides just brute force, gritting my teeth through the pain, um, I would basically just change my grip slightly. Whether I might hold with the thumb and the index finger, and then I'd switch to where I'm just holding with my pinky and my ring finger, and I do little things like that, trying to get 2 or 3 strokes, take a break, and then change my grip, get 2 or 3 strokes, take a break, and that's more or less how I muscled through it. It was absolute agony, that day, and I was very, very defeated,
Yeah.
by the end of that day. But and then with the stomach issues that also kicked in, like it just seemed like every Murphy's Law was kicking my ass that day. literally. So it was yeah, that one was rough, but it was one of those. You're also there's a point where you also have to realize you're on the water and you're alone.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get yourself there, which is a whole another aspect of doing something like this. It's inevitably everything. The buck stops with you. There
Yes.
is no come get me. Now, if I had to, I could have absolutely picked up the phone and probably called CETO or some other boat rescue service. Maybe even a friend to be like, hey, can you drop what you're doing, go get your boat and come get me? I could have absolutely done that, but it was I tend to suck at asking for help, which is I hate to say, but it was one of those that no, I kind of kept the mentality, or I tried my best to maintain the mentality of you got yourself here. Now get yourself out, because it's not a situation bad enough to warrant a rescue, if you will. Or maybe it was, and my pride prevented me from admitting that I needed rescue. But ultimately, it was that mentality that, yeah, you're in pain, but you have no other choice. You have to at least get to X location. And I did. When to elaborate a little bit more, because I didn't elaborate on how I got back from keg. So I got to keg with those issues with the hand, but honestly, to get back from keg to River Road Park, it's the total distance is 1 mile. And I would say 3/4 of that mile, I actually just walked along the bank, pulling the boat with a rope in my good hand behind me, because my left hand was so shot. And then the little bits that I had to paddle, I just suffered through it. Okay, you got to paddle this stretch, from this point to this point. But the majority of it, I just walked it back, which also came in handy because, again, there were multiple times I had to stop and take care of personal business as I was going through the stages of diarrhea at that point. So
Yeah.
I mean, it was also that going on. But yeah, it's strictly the mentality of you're out here, it's all on you to figure it out. And to me, that is that's the draw of the challenge, of doing stuff like this, of everything is on you, go figure it out.
Yeah.
It really brings out what it is that you're made of, your innovation, your endurance, and your stress management, because you're having to go over and over, especially in high stress situations, all the options, all the possibilities, and make decisions on what to do.
The ultimate self-reliance, the
Yep.
ultimate test. But part of these survivor type situations is also knowing when you can push and knowing when you need to tap out due to health risk or safety.
Absolutely.
And clearly you had to make that call when you were feeling well. And so, multi-part question here. When did you know something was awry beyond your hand and like limb pain? When did you know something was going on in the stomach? And how hard was it to make that call to say, I need to go home?
So I mean, obviously, as I said in the video, I had Thai food, and anybody who's eaten Thai food has probably had that day, that morning, the next day, where things are a little rough on the back end. That didn't seem too out of place. So initially, I felt fine. Okay, I was like, okay, that's not anything crazy. But as I was paddling down, there were a couple times I had to dump off the boat into the water and take care of business. And I was like, man, this is a little bit more than normal. And I get to the island, and it happens 6 or 7 more times. And
Oh my
that's when I
God.
said, okay, we're up to now 10 to a dozen times that I've had to go. I'm now flushing the water in my body.
Mm-hmm.
It's all water at this point. And it was one of those, it's like, nope, there's no way I can dehydrate myself on an island, more or less alone, and hope to survive this. I have to get whatever this is under control. Lo and behold, again, I ended up finding out that I did have Giardia. not certain that that flushing was fully Giardia. There may have also just been Giardia and a stomach bug. I don't know.
Hmm.
But I definitely had Giardia. There may have been an additional like 24-hour bug in there because I made the decision. Yeah, you're right. I had to make the call. And when I got back to the house, I was feverish the rest of the night and partly through the next day. Um, and it took a lot of drugs, like Imodium, basically to get things back under control enough where I would stop flushing water. Took the time to rehydrate as best I could before, luckily, I was able to pull myself together enough to go and finish that final day 34, 36 hours later.
Yeah. And I think the most heart-wrenching part for me of the video series was in episode 3 when you're looking pretty ragged back at home and you said the phrase, maybe next year, as if
Yep.
you'd already cashed in your chips. And then you resurrect, you know, very quickly. Certainly you had to feel pretty proud of that.
I mean, I don't know. It's one of those, but definitely when I was doing that video, letting people know, because that video, that clip, where I'm sitting in the house was
Hmm.
basically using my phone to let people that I've been in contact with, letting them know the progress, so they knew I wasn't dead. Uh, Letting them know the progress. Hey, I've had to stop. Um,
Hmm.
and it was going through my head. Even then, I was going through, and this was not so much survival. It was now the what can we do to finish mentality. Because yeah, I'm
Yes.
sick. Yeah, I'm hurting. But it's, well, if it's this, maybe this. And if it's that, maybe this. And going through all these possibilities of, can I get back out there? And if I can't, what does that mean? Well, ultimately, it means that you didn't make it. A lot of people were like, yeah, but you've done all that mileage. Like for me, it was, a lot of people were like, well, a lot of people would argue that yes, you did all that mileage, but for me, that's still a DNF. That's still a did not finish. Nope. That means next year, attempt number 2, and we've learned all these things, and we're going to try this again. Not something that I wanted to do, honestly, after being 18 miles from the finish,
I
and
know.
after I'd gone 180 some, to have to swallow that possibility, that sucked. It was rough, but
So even
hey,
though you
it was,
recovered quite quickly and
yep.
strung it together with only, I don't know, how many hours in between? 20, 12,
It
15?
was 36, about
Oh,
a little
okay.
less than that. So yeah, I basically one night and one full 24-hour day. So yeah,
Okay.
about 36 hours.
So because the paddling was basically segmented and not done all strung together, you consider that did not finish still.
No, as I say in the videos, I think that pulling off the water for a very short period of time, and I argue a short period of time is less than 72 hours for illness,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
acceptable. If I just pulled
Hmm.
off the water because, well, I want to take a week off and then, because I just don't want to do this right now and then go back. No,
Different
you didn't
situation.
do it. That's a different situation. And also, anybody who wants to say, well, you really didn't do it. Well, okay, I just had everything in my stomach flush itself, everything. And
Yes.
then on top of that, all the water in my body flush itself. I am barely holding myself together and barely have enough water back in me to urinate a color that I can semi deem acceptable. And
Yes.
we're going out here to do this. I was really rough at that point. Again, my body was still not fully regulating heat. I was getting hot and getting cold for reasons unknown to me, but I shouldn't have been. Again, I still was doing my best to hydrate the entire time because I was just uh, absolutely flushed out. Um, and I was working through a number of other issues that were still lingering from it. So, and I explained this in the video, it just took my 80 to 90% from, sitting in a kayak for all that time, sleeping in a hammock all that time, eating crap freeze dried food all that time, yeah, now I slept in my own bed and I got regular food, but I had all these other issues. So I just came out with a different 80% that I'm now going to go down this river in. It was not something that I would say was restful or reinvigorating. It was, no, I feel good enough that we're going to make this attempt and hopefully we finish, because damn it, I'm not going to let 18 miles get in the way of me and having this under my belt.
Right. And when you beached at the very end, were you just too exhausted to enjoy it and absorb it?
Oh, I was done.
Or,
I was absolutely done, because the last 6 miles we discussed earlier in today's talk was
Mhm.
that chop. There's no, getting it up to speed and just letting it drift, which I really needed given my condition. No, I had to, just stroke, 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 stroke with no break, more or less. The last 6 miles, if you're maintaining 3 miles an hour, and I know I wasn't, so it was between 2 and 3 hours of just go. So when I hit that beach, I was just
Mhm.
absolutely dead. And
A
that's
beached
why
whale.
there's other than the video that I'm sitting in the kayak, there was no, I usually would do an after action with the GoPro or something. No, that's why
Mhm.
the video more or less ends with that picture of me standing on the beach with my slumped. Like,
That's all you got.
that's all I got. Like, I can barely hold a smile. Take the damn picture so I can get off this beach. I was done. But I felt it was one of those that, sitting in the car on the drive back, it's like, I did it. I freaking did it. Can I take a nap
Nice.
now?
Nice. And did you treat yourself well the next day with food
No.
and beverage?
The Giardia, because of what it was doing to me,
Yeah.
it basically restricted my diet to uh really light stuff like white bread and water was pretty much all I was holding at that point. There was not a
Wow.
lot of eating really good food. And then when I finally got the proper antibiotics to clear it, those antibiotics, you cannot drink with them. So
Right.
it screws with your gut. And it wasn't until the following Friday. So I pulled out on Sunday. Monday, I got the drugs to get me fixed. And it wasn't until Friday that I could actually go out and enjoy a double bacon cheeseburger with a glass of whiskey to really celebrate having done that. So it is what it is.
No
It
Popeyes.
didn't, trust me, it did not hurt my feelings one bit to wait that long, given my condition.
Oh,
And
yeah.
trust me, it only made that whiskey taste sweeter when it finally went down.
That's fantastic. Um, Before we get into your future plans on the channel and
Sure.
in your adventuring life, um, what's something new that you learned about yourself?
Oh, that's a
I know you've
hard
had a
one.
lot of experience in your life, as a veteran, as an engineer, traveling everywhere, training.
Um,
Certainly, there's some insight that you've gained on this journey,
oh, that's a hard one, because
or a goal that you've
I
set for
wouldn't argue that I'm
yourself.
the philosophical type, but now get a couple drinks in me, that might change. But
Or are there any new goals you've maybe set for yourself
um,
as an
honestly, I
outcome?
don't know what the next big one's gonna be. I mean, I live in Wilmington,
Mm-hmm.
so as I said, it's
Yep.
always four-wheeling on the beach. There's always the paddle boarding, or we can,
Mm-hmm.
paddle a couple miles and camp out on one of the islands here. As far as the next big one,
Yeah.
um, I have a dog. His name's Cohen. He's a 3-year-old American Pit. He is not a fan of the water. So the next one, I'm thinking, if I do another big adventure, I'm thinking about doing some big hike, whether it's Appalachian Trail or any number of hikes out in the Smoky Mountains. And we might do some major mileage, like a 50 miler, uh, at some point with him. That way he can do something alongside with me. As far as big personal insights, uh, honestly, it was just that, I got the only thing I really came away with it was, okay, I now have this notch in my belt that so few people can say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can push myself 32 miles on a kayak in one day. I can push myself 200 over the course of 10 days. Not something a lot of people can say that they've done, or they can say that they've
Mm-hmm.
done it, but you haven't proven that you could have done it. So I guess there's that bragging right aspect to a degree is probably what this is sounding like, but overall, it's just the additional confidence of, you know, if you
Yeah.
can put together something like that, what else can you do? Um,
Right.
so, and that again, that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. What else can I do? What's the next big one? So, we'll figure it out. It might be, like I said, it might be a big hike with my dog. It might be some big sailing trip. I've always wanted to do the transatlantic crossing, though that won't be
Mm-hmm.
alone. Definitely won't be alone. And there's a couple different things, but like I said, right now I'm just trying to calm down from this one. The adventures on the channel, if I make more content, or when I make more content, is probably just going to be smaller local stuff to kind of sell, maybe not so much sell, but just share um, the things that or the great resources we have here in the greater Wilmington area, with all the paddling and all the beach activities that we can do out here. It would be probably a little centric to that until I get that next big adventure. But yeah, there's definitely room for growth, and I'm looking forward to figuring out as I go, more or less.
Definitely. Well, they say there's so much really to be found in your own backyard, and you
Hmm.
never really see it all, um,
Absolutely.
even in your own backyard. So it's worth something to continue looking around Wilmington. But again, really, really riveting story. I'm so glad you took the time to document everything, and have it for the archives and have proof. And it's definitely one for the ages. And it's been great getting the intimate details on your journey tonight, Jimmy.
Thank you. I really appreciate you, Monica. For those listening, Monica is the one who gave me a lot of insight on where to get the music that I got, what program do I need to use for basically editing and putting these videos together. And there's even more software now that I've learned that I'm going to have to use for putting together this episode. So, Monica, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate all the help that you've given me. Again, listeners, for those of you that have watched this, I highly recommend you guys go and check out Moxie. Again, the magazine for that is the voice of women in infrastructure. Its website is www.themoxievoice.com, and I'm going to put the link in the description below. This is definitely going to be a great resource for any woman that's in the industry, or for any teenage girl or young girl that's looking to be a leader in what has largely been a lot of the male-dominated world. This is an absolute great resource, and it comes out September 28th. You said, Monica?
Yep, September 28th, we
Excellent.
launch.
So again, everybody that's watching, those of you that have been watching the journey so far, thank you very much for your viewership. I hope you've enjoyed the material. If you've liked today's talk, please make sure to click that like button. And if you want to see more content as it comes out, please hit that subscribe button to be notified when I post new adventures. With that said, thank you all again. This is James, the Marine Castaway, signing off.